Well, hello and welcome to the channel. I'm Cindy Daychek with Queen Bee Creations. I really appreciate your being here. Sorry about the cold. Sound a little more nasally today, but hey, you're perfectly safe this way, so nobody's gonna catch it from me. I get donations of things quite often. So people, before they're taking things to drop off at the dump or donate to the thrift store, very often will check in and see if I want anything. So I was lucky enough to get this entire tray of old cutlery, which may seem like a weird thing for me to say, oh yes, my goodness, I do want it. But yes, I do want it. Now, one, because I did do a video where I had made wind chimes. Those sound awesome. And I kept it for myself. And then I had so many requests. I happened to find another teapot that was just perfect for it. So I made another one, which I'll sell in a shop. So I'm just finishing that one off, but made with some of the cutlery from this stash. Now, another project that I want to do is a little bit different and a little kind of weirdly involved. I wasn't sure how I was going to do it, but the person that gave these to me said, hey, so let me put glasses on. They had seen someone make little tiny bud vases out of the handles of these because these are hollow, right? You have the Tang of this, so these are silver plated, and this is stainless steel. So, I mean, don't despair, I'm not taking apart or ruining good sterling silver, and I don't think anybody's gonna give me sterling silver to use. But you find stuff like this in the thrift store all the time, right? Like my thrift store has baggies hanging on the wall of old cutlery and things. So if you find these ones that have the big puffy bottom, these are not typically solid at all. They are hollow. So what they had done was they had taken this apart, and I've got one taken apart to show you. Oh, now I stuffed it back in, and it becomes hollow. So that's what we're going to do. And I have an old piece of barn board that I've cut down, and let me show you what I did. This was, okay, so taking it out like this looks easy. It was a little more involved than that. So I have a little tiny hacksaw. Now this one happens to be a jewelry hacksaw. So one that, I just realized that my blade is longer and I can extend the length of this, which would be very smart. Okay, so this one's kind of a jewelry hacksaw and used primarily for doing jump rings and things like that from back in the day when I actually did things like that. And I had it to be able to cut metal tubing to line some of the glass beads that I was making. So I just happen to have this still. But you could use a bigger hacksaw just with a little bit more caution. What I did do was I took this, and there is a join here where you see the stainless steel meet up with the silver plated. So you can see where they join together. We need to break that seal. And so what I did do was I kind of took my saw and just slowly hacksawed my way around. Now, if you have a vise, this goes easier, but it's kind of got, I don't know, like some metal welding joining compound in there, and you have to break that seal. So, you know, taking this around and cutting this apart so that it has taken all that out is what you want to do first. So I'm just going to continue to do that until I have that at the point that I need it. And then I'll bring you back for the next step of how to get these apart. Okay, let's chat a little bit about these. So, if you're looking for the absolute easiest way to be able to get these to empty themselves of the blade, to divest themselves of the blade, then what you do is you clamp this into a vise. You take a torch and you heat it all the way around, and then you use pliers to pull the tang out, to pull this out. What that does is the torch heats up all of the solder so that it's now liquid, and it allows you to be able to release this. You then take pliers and you dump this out and heat it and let all the rest of the solder pour out. The guy that I watched do that had big leather jerkin thing on, and he talked a little bit about how sometimes when you pull the tang out, solder goes flying. Struck me as pretty dangerous. And the likelihood of mine burning myself, and it was pretty high. So I tried to come up with a way that I could do it more easily. The first one turned out pretty, not easy, but with some effort. So what I did do was around the join, I used my little baby hacksaw and I cut all the way around through the solder. And you'll actually feel the difference between when you're sawing the solder and when you get down to the tang. Then I kind of took a little pokey tool. It's nice and specific. And I just took out any of the excess solder that I could see. And then took a thin little screwdriver, and I could see a little bit of space between this and the rest of the tang of the knife. And I just started to slowly enlarge the hole until I could pull it out. The second one didn't go as smoothly as this, meaning I couldn't pull it out. So what I did do was I took this one, my heat gun, and I just, when it was all really kind of wobbly, but I just couldn't pull it out because it tends to be a little bit wider down here. You know, the solder just settles where it starts to widen. So I took my heat gun, kind of warmed it up a little bit, and I was able to slide it out. It kind of loosened the solder a little bit. It doesn't liquefy it because the heat gun doesn't get as hot as the torch does. So much safer, but still the stainless, the sterling silver coating on this, right? The silver plate gets really pretty hot. So you saw me holding on to it with this for good reason. So the second one popped out pretty easy, and I thought it was onto something. The third one was not easy all the way through. The cutting just didn't seem to matter. I couldn't see a spacing between the tang and the thing. I tried heating it up, and this started to split as well, so it's not as neat. That's the way it goes. So, moral of the story. You determine how cute this is at the end and whether you want to do it. If you're doing a lot of them, like the man that I want to do this with the torch, this is what he does. He gets old cutlery and he turns them into these little mini bud vases, and he sells them at markets and all that kind of stuff. So he's got a whole production assembly of this, and So I think he was doing like 56, 76, something like that of them all at once, in which case, you know, getting out the big honking torch and the vise and everything was so worth it. I'm just doing these. Whoops, I'm just doing these for this little project. So it didn't seem worth it to me. And I figured I'd lose a bunch of you as soon as I pulled out a big honking torch. And I'm a bit of a klutz anyway, so it's a minor miracle I didn't saw a finger off using the hacksaw. So there you go. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to take my Dremel with a bit of a grinding point here, and I am just going to grind these down, get rid of any of the sharp edges, and then we'll carry on. Now that the hard part is over, I tell you, sometimes it's the crafts that I think are going to be just super quick, no trouble at all, that cause me the biggest aggravation. So, oh, and now I can't open my thing. Oh, I tell ya. There we go. All right, so I have my board, and it's a nice rustic board. The only thing that I did with it was I gave it a quick sand so that I don't get splinters. And I'm going to paint this black faced side because I'm going to do it in white, and then I am going to sand it back again. So I want kind of a little bit of that rustic look, and you know, we kind of can't move on until our paint dries. So I have White Swan by DIY, just happens to be what I had open. Any white would do, but you could certainly do this with, you know, any color of paint that would go with your decor. I'm staying in neutral just because I'm going to put it into the shop, and I just want a bit of a contrast for some of the flowers that I'm going to put in our little bud vases. So for this, I'm not, you know, because I'm going to be sanding it back anyway, I'm not worried about getting perfect coverage on this, only because I'm going to be sanding it back to the dark anyway. So I quite like having some of those rustic spots still showing through. So I'm going to let that dry. I don't need to do another coat, so it's just that one coat and done. And then I'm going to take it to the sander and sand it down a little bit before I come back at you. We've got our board. We've got our board all sanded. I'm going to flip it over, and I just want to put the hanging hardware on now. It's just so much easier to do before you start putting stuff on the front of it, which kind of makes sense, but it's easy to forget, and then you have to add it on later. Because I've actually remembered, let's just go with that now. That was so not centered. Usually I'm pretty good. Okay, there we go. Just, you know, kind of roughly. And this is going to be fairly light, so I'm just putting just a little sawtooth hanger on it. You could, with this, staple on some ribbon on the back if you wanted and have the ribbon showing from the front. I really wanted this to be somewhat simple on the front, so I decided not to go with stencils or transfers. If you wanted to do a stencil or maybe a stamp of some kind, then you might want to have the board a little bit higher so that you'd have space up above to be able to do that while you still have your little bud vases below. Now, I'm going to stage this up with little fake flowers, but know that these are, I was going to say they're hollow. Of course they're hollow, but they're solid in the sense that you could put water in and the water's not going to leak. So they're sealed. That's it. They're sealed. So you could put water into them and put like a fresh bud in there. But the idea is that we're gonna line up 3 of them across the front of this and be able to have it kind of decorating. Now, what I have done is I've taken a little bit of some faux flowers, and I was just getting an idea of what would fit. So I have in there a little leafy stem. I have a little sprig of these kind of little purple bells, these tiny little white guys, and then I have one tall shoot of this sort of, let me cut another one while I'm at it because we know I need a third one. Just looking for one that looks good. Okay. Yeah, so I'm just fitting all this in. It holds more than you think. All right, so doing that. Squishing that down in. There we go. And I just want to sort of get them the same height, roughly. Okay, and I'm just looking at it to see what I might want to do. I'm thinking I might do a little something across the bottom, maybe some kind of a little stamp of something. So let me go kind of take a peek at my stash and see what I got hanging out, and then I'll come back. What I did find, what I did settle on a really, really old IOD transfer, which was called French pots, which are these little tiny mini pots transfers. So again, you could have stenciled this on with one of the Jamie Ray vintage. There's tons of little pots transfers and perfumery stencils. You could use any of the pots transfers from IOD. You could use a little piece of one of the inlays. You could just put a ribbon around the middle and have these hanging, so adding a little bit of interest there. So much that you could do. I just decided to go with this. So I have one that says Le Fleur and one that says Le Jardin. So kind of in keeping with the little mini flowers look. And I'm just going to take a little tool and rub this on. This is a really uneven surface, and it's an unsealed surface. So, you know, kind of going against the grain here in terms of what's recommended. We'll see how it sticks. And my paint is still actually just a little cool to the touch, which means it's not quite dry. So I'm rushing things a little bit here. So we'll see how it does. I have a couple of tricks to make it stick if it doesn't want to. Okay, some of it wants to, some of it doesn't. So we'll see. There we go. Okay, because I was rushing this, it's unsealed, it's not quite dry, all of this stuck except part of the words, and I really wanted the words there. So what I have here is just a little bit of Big Top on my brush, and I'm gonna put that right under where the transfer is not sticking. And now I'm going to rub off my transfer. And it sticks. So if you ever have transfers that are just, if the transfer is being difficult, then this is what you can do. I mean, in this instance, it wasn't the transfer being difficult, it was me rushing things. But that happens too. So, you know, if you're a little impatient, and let me just kind of line up my words here. Okay. And same deal goes on this one. If there's sections that just don't want to release onto my piece, then I'm just going to take my paintbrush, get a little tiny bit of the Big Top, or you could use the liquid patina as well. I just went with whichever one I found first on the shelf. This just seemed perfect for this one. And there we go. Just nice and simple. So I just really wanted the little flower pieces to stand out on their own. So on this, let me just do my quick measure before I start gluing things in place. This is 14-inch board, so I'm putting the one little knife bottom at 7 and the others at 2 inches in a piece. So what I do have is some hot glue. Then I'm just going to run up the back. And then, watching my ruler as my guide, I'm going to stick that in place. Is you can take a magnet onto the back and then just do individual little bud vases for sticking onto the fridge, glue strands, anything like that. So you don't necessarily have to attach them onto a board. You could simply do it elsewhere, but this is what we look like. Super cute. Again, you can put little live flowers into that. So was it worth the aggravation? I don't know. If I decided that I loved this, or there was a lot of call for these, then I would probably look to, because I have a mess of these knives, right? I have tons. So at some point, I may decide, okay, it's best to turn them all into little bud vases and maybe sell them on the site, in which case I would definitely do the torch version. I would leather up and kind of suck it up and try the torch method to be able to liquefy some of the solder and pull the tang out, lickety split, drop it into a bucket of cold water, the tang, use my pliers to dump out the excess solder out of the base, the knife base, and then put that off to the side. By the time that you do that, you're really going to want to have a mess of them that you're doing. So if there was a big call for the bases or for creating these little buds, I would do that. If I'm doing, as I did now, just 3, then certainly you can mess around with how I did it, taking a little hacksaw, getting rid of all of cutting through where the solder is. I also took my Dremel on one of them and used one of the cutting blades to go around instead of the hacksaw to try something else. That also worked. And then using something like a little mini chisel, or I was using a flathead screwdriver to kind of pry it up, loosen a little bit. Once I got some wiggle room, I took the heat gun to kind of soften it out, and I was able to just kind of pop it out. A little bit more of a convoluted process than just take a torch to it. But it didn't need as much specialized equipment, and I was able to do it in the shop and I didn't burn myself. So there's always a plus there. So again, definitely something different, definitely something that's a cool use of cutlery. I'm gonna be coming up with more. So I've done 2 things now with some cutlery, doing the wind chimes, doing these little bud vases. I'm going to be coming up with more ideas. Hit me up with some ideas that you have, and I'll see what I can do. But as always, looking forward to hearing what you have to say in the comments, and seeing you next time. Until then, take care.